Another Friday morning has arrived, and it has now been several weeks since Sharon went on a date with Robert, but she hasn't heard a word from him since. They said goodbye after dinner at his hotel restaurant, and the last thing Robert said was that she would hear from him soon. But now weeks had passed, and she had not received a phone call, an email, or even a message from this man who had been possessing her all day and telling her that he wanted to meet her again and that he would arrange it with Marvin. And since that day when Sharon was on a date with Robert, she hasn't heard anything from Marvin either. He then told her that he was going on a business trip to Australia and New Zealand and would see her when he returned, but Marvin never said when he planned to return. During their lunch meeting, Marvin talked only about how impressed Robert was with her, and that he was especially pleased with her behavior in bed. But he didn't mention whether he'd talked to Robert about setting up another date with her. He simply handed her a generous check for services rendered and told her that he was pleased with her work and that she had a lot more work to do. Marvin wasn't her boss, at least not in the traditional sense. Rather, he was a shrewd black businessman who managed a small but carefully selected group of women whom he used to encourage and influence business clients and partners to help him advance his global business interests. He skillfully managed his flock without offering his women to each of his business partners. But those who received this privilege received something special: quality time and sexual relations with a trophy female specimen. Sharon was the newest trophy in Marvin's pack. And since Sharon was new to his pack, new to this life, and an inexperienced performer, Marvin specifically arranged her first date with Robert because Robert was his break-in. Robert was the business partner who had the honor of developing the new girls in the pack. A man who groomed women physically, mentally, and emotionally for the entertainment of Marvin's other business clients and associates. Robert was a master of sex. He knew women. He knew everything about a woman's body, mind, and soul. He knew how to look at a woman. He knew how to talk to a woman. He knew how to touch a woman. He knew how to seduce a woman. But most importantly, he was a highly trained sexual expert, which is why Marvin arranged for Robert to be Sharon's first date. So, during her date with Robert, which began before lunch and lasted all afternoon and into the evening, Sharon experienced time and sex with a man that she could never have dreamed or imagined. Robert had done his thing with her, and in the process he had awakened the dark, wicked side of Sharon's sexuality, which she now wanted to satisfy more than anything else. Surprisingly, or perhaps unsurprisingly, Sharon was said to be happily married and in love with her husband. She always told her friends and family that she loved Dan more than anything in the world, that he was the best thing that had ever happened to her, that their life together is wonderful. Their marriage was really good. She and Dan had an active sex life, and the sex was good. But sex with Dan was nothing compared to what she experienced with Robert. She wanted a man who would take her for his pleasures and fantasies. She wanted a man who would be cruel to her and force her to do things that she would not do in normal life. She wanted a man who would treat her as his property. Sharon trembled and shuddered just thinking about Robert and what they did together and what he did to her. Something she desperately wanted to experience again. But now he wasn't there, and she was upset and stressed and didn't know how to relieve that tension. And to make matters worse, Dan was on a business trip in Europe and wouldn't be back until Sunday evening. Two men, two sexual partners in her life, and both of them had disappeared, leaving her in painful inactivity. So on this Friday morning, sitting at her kitchen table, drinking coffee, staring at her silent cell phone, thinking about sex with Robert and Dan, and waiting for them to come back into her life, Sharon decided she wouldn't wait any longer. She decided she was going to do something about her sexual tension. She was going to find a black man, and she decided that she would find this man today. And she had an idea where she would find it: the Sands Southside Club. Sands Southside was the hippest nightclub in the city. It was a place where they met, drank, dined, danced, had fun, and more. It was a place to see and be seen. For women, it was a place where people could approach them and try to have an affair. For men, it was a place to find women looking to have a good time, have an adventure, and maybe have sex. Sharon had never been to San Souci, but oddly enough, stories about San Souci circulated in her social circle. Some of her friends went there for a bachelorette party and shared their stories with her and other friends. These were middle-aged, mature, married women who told her about their adventures, how they dressed sexy and flirted with men who bought them drinks, danced with them, and tried to seduce them into sex. Some of her friends went all the way and had sex. One of her friends told her that she had sex with 2 men in one evening. She told Sharon that she liked it because it was bold and daring. Another friend told her how she left San Souci with 3 young men and had sex with them. When Sharon listened to these stories, she was shocked and could not believe what she was hearing. She never thought that women in her social circle could do something so provocative. To be honest, she was outraged by their behavior, but now that her sexuality had been awakened by Robert, she was ready to do something provocative. She was ready to do something bold and daring to relieve her sexual tension. Until this moment, she had never imagined that she could have sex like her friend with 3 men. But now, with an urgent need to satisfy her desire, she would happily go with 1, 2, or 3 men and let them do with her what they wanted. Sharon was desperate for love and sex. So, as Sharon thought back and thought about these stories, she became more and more convinced that San Souci was where she would go that evening. And after she got dressed and left the house, she spent most of Friday morning at the salon, where she had her long blonde hair done and given a manicure and pedicure. Then, after a quick lunch with her friends, she returned home and began the long process of choosing clothes and preparing herself to look attractive, seductive, and desirable to the man she hoped to attract and who would satisfy her desperate need for love, sex, and intimacy. By 7 o'clock, she was dressed in a bright red sweater that hugged her tightly and emphasized her stunning figure and impressive breasts. She paired the sweater with a short black leather pencil skirt and black stockings, and to complete her sexy outfit, she wore tall black leather boots. Under her sweater and skirt, she wore provocative lingerie that Dan brought her from Gooseberry Intimates in London. She was a complete package, both outside and inside. The outside is what was meant to captivate and enchant potential lovers. And inside, for the lucky man she chose as her lover for the night, there was a reward in the form of her body, dressed in seductive black lingerie. Before heading to San Souci, she stood in front of a full-length mirror and looked at the reflection of a middle-aged woman with the figure and build of a much younger person. Most women her age wouldn't dare dress in a tight sweater, a short leather skirt, and tall boots, but on Sharon the outfit looked natural. It was her style, and she wore it beautifully. Her perfectly styled long blonde hair, hanging seductively over her shoulders and framing her face, made her even more impressive, mysterious, and seductive. She was pleased with her appearance and was ready to go in search of a lover. Sharon left her home in the suburbs and drove downtown. But when she got to San Souci, her nerves gave way and she couldn't even bring herself to drive into the parking lot. Fear gripped her, and this fear made her turn the car and quickly drive away from the club. But she wasn't ready to give up, so instead of returning home defeated, she decided to drive around the city to calm down and take control of her emotions. And after driving around the city and talking to herself for more than an hour, she plucked up the courage to return to San Souci and pull into the parking lot. It was almost 9 o'clock, and the parking lot was almost full, but Sharon was lucky to find a spot not too far from the entrance. After she parked the car, she looked in the mirror and checked her makeup, lipstick, and hair again. It was time to act. She turned off the engine and got out of the car. But as she walked from the car to the club entrance, she was overcome with nerves again. Suddenly, she began to fear what might await her inside, and this made her doubt whether she should enter the club alone. In addition, her friend's stories about San Souci popped into her head again, and she began to think about what she might encounter and what situations she might find herself in. For a moment, these thoughts scared her. But fear, nerves, and doubts did not stop her this time. Sharon was on a mission, and after a moment's hesitation, she opened the door and stepped inside. San Souci was noisy and crowded. After all, it was Friday night. Thank God it's Friday time, and there was live music playing in the club, people dancing, and crowds of people sitting at tables, talking, drinking, and dining. This was a new experience for Sharon, and for a moment she was at a loss as to what to do, but her instincts told her to find a place to sit. She looked around the room nervously, but of course all the tables were occupied. The lack of empty seats made her feel awkward and uncomfortable. What should I do now? She thought in panic. And at that moment she decided to just forget about this crazy idea and leave. But before she could turn around and leave, one of the club's security guards noticed that she was alone and escorted her to a seat at the bar. As she walked through the club, she noticed that many men were looking at her, and this made her feel even more awkward and out of place. But once she was safely on the bar stool, Sharon began to control her feelings, and after she drank her first vodka martini, she became more comfortable in this environment. Then, while drinking her second martini, she relaxed, letting her skirt ride up a little higher than usual and crossing her legs. She attracted a lot of attention from men and, of course, also from curious and envious women. So it didn't take long before the men noticed that she was alone and started approaching the bar to hit on her. Young, middle-aged, and older men approached her, tried to start a conversation, asked her to dance, and offered to buy her a drink. She rejected everyone, and all those who watched this scene in Sands Southside began to think that she was either waiting for someone or looking for someone special. So eventually, the flow of suitors dried up, and while Sharon was talking to the bartender, another man walked up to the bar and interrupted their conversation. "So, madam, what are you looking for tonight?" he asked. Sharon turned her head to see who was speaking and saw a tall, middle-aged, sophisticated, and masculine-looking black man. Sharon trembled. "What do you mean?" she asked him. "I mean, it looks like you're the only one here. You've been approached by almost every man in the club, and you've turned them all away. So it's obvious that you're looking for something special and haven't found it yet," the man said. Sharon was stunned and didn't know what to say, and before she could respond, the man asked her to dance. "So, will you dance with me? It's a crime to let such beautiful legs go to waste, while you just sit here drinking martinis waiting for Mr. Right. These legs need to dance with me on the dance floor." "What did you say?" she asked him. "I said, will you dance with me?" Sharon thought for a moment. Um, yes, okay. "Yes, I'll dance with you," Sharon stammered. "Great, let's go then." The man reached out, took Sharon's hand, helped her off the bar stool, and led her to the dance floor. "By the way, my name is Luther." The man introduced himself as they began to dance. "Nice to meet you, Luther. I'm Sharon." To put it mildly, Sharon and Luther hit it off immediately, and until Sands Southside closed, they danced, talked, drank, ate, and became increasingly engrossed in each other. And after Sands Southside closed, they continued their conversation in the parking lot. After some time, the conversations turned to touching. The touching turned into hugs. The hugs turned into kisses. And then hugs and kisses led to Luther taking Sharon's hand and leading her across the parking lot to his outfitted van. Luther opened the van door and climbed inside. He then extended his hand and helped Sharon up and into the van. It was dark inside the van and Sharon couldn't see anything. "Give me a second and I'll turn on the light," Luther said. Luther started the van, and a moment later the interior was filled with bright light. "Oh God, it's so bright," she exclaimed. "Sorry about that," Luther said. Luther flipped a couple of switches, turning off the bright interior lights and turning on soft blue and purple LED lights. "This is much better," she said as her eyes adjusted to the LED lighting. "Yes, that's better," he agreed. They could now see each other in the van, and Luther invited her to sit on the sofa that ran along the back of the van. Luther then sat in the captain's chair in front. Sharon sat on the sofa, let her skirt rise higher, crossed her legs, and looked incredibly impressive and seductive. "God, that's a really nice van," Sharon remarked. "Thanks, this is what they call a Class B motorhome," he replied. "Very nice," she said. Luther's van was a 24-foot luxury Class B motorhome that could sleep 7 people and provide room for 2 to sleep. It was richly finished in wood, leather, stainless steel, and chrome. The floor was a combination of wood and carpet, and it had a sound system and a flat-screen TV. "Wow, you even have a small kitchen," she exclaimed. "No, it's just a galley, not a kitchen." "Is this the bathroom?" she asked, pointing to the door. "Actually, it's just a toilet," Luther clarified. "Very nice," she said. "Do you live here?" Sharon asked naively. "Oh no, I have an apartment on Oak Valley Road," he laughed. Sharon thought for a moment how stupid her question was. Of course he doesn't live in that van. Stupid, she thought. "I love Oak Valley. It's a really nice area. I love driving through there and looking at the beautiful houses and apartments and condos. It's like driving through a park," she told him. "Yes, I like it here. It's a nice area," he replied. "I have a friend who recently moved into one of the apartment complexes. I don't remember which one, but she really likes it and is happy with life in the area," Sharon commented. "Yes, there are really good apartments in Oak Valley," he confirmed. Then there was an awkward silence. Luther sat looking at Sharon, and she looked at him too. Both struggled with what to say next. Their passion, which flared in the parking lot, cooled when they moved into the van. Now their job was to reignite that flame and get back to what they were in the van for together. "Madam, I have beer, wine, water, and soda. What should I bring you?" he asked. Sharon thought for a moment and then asked for wine. Luther stood up from his chair, walked over to the galley, opened a bottle of red, and poured 2 glasses. He then walked to the back of the van, handed Sharon her glass of wine, and sat down next to her. "Madam, you look incredibly sexy sitting on my sofa. May I take a photo of you?" asked Luther. "Of course," she said, without thinking about his request. Luther stood up, pulled his iPhone out of his pocket, and took a few pictures of Sharon. When he realized that she felt comfortable posing for photographs, he began directing her through a series of poses, each of which captured her in a seductive and alluring pose. Each pose was a little more provocative than the previous one. She posed beautifully. When he was done, he sat back down on the couch, and they started looking through the photos together. "They're good," he told her. "You are very photogenic," he continued. Sharon moved closer to Luther to get a better look at the photos. "Let me see," she said. "Yeah, they're pretty good. I like them," she said. "Pretty good. You're gorgeous. You look great in the photo," he told her. They finished looking through the photos, and Luther put his phone aside. He then hugged Sharon as they sat side by side and sipped wine. "It feels good," she told him. "Your hair is beautiful," he told her. "Thank you." Sharon responded to his touch by moving even closer to him. "I like this wine. It's really good," Sharon told Luther. "This is Pinot Noir from La Crema," he told her. "Well, it's really good. I'll have to buy a bottle. Where do you get it?" "Oh, you can find it in most liquor stores. I think I bought this bottle at Skinflint's wine store," he told her. "Oh, I bought wine at Skinflint. I'll have to look for it next time I'm there," she said. Then, feeling that the moment had arrived, he kissed her. They had sex. Saturday morning. The sunlight streaming through the van's windows woke Luther up. He was stunned and for a few moments tried to remember where he was, what he was doing, and who he was with. But when he felt Sharon curled up next to him, sleeping, he remembered everything. Then he looked at his watch. It was already 8:30 in the morning, approaching 9 o'clock. Hell, they spent the entire night together. Now he clearly remembered where he was and what he had done last night. Quietly, so as not to wake Sharon, he found a blanket and covered her. She was sleeping so soundly that she didn't even move when he covered her. Then he found his clothes, got dressed, and stopped for a few minutes to look at her sleeping and remember their night together. She was so beautiful and sexy, and he couldn't remember how many times they had sex. Was he good enough for this incredible woman? With these thoughts in mind, he decided that he needed a cup of coffee and maybe something to eat. Not far from San Souci, there was a McDonald's. Luther thought about driving there, but didn't want to wake up Sharon. After last night, he needed some fresh air, so he decided to just walk. He quietly got out of the van and headed down the street. As he walked, he thought about the previous night. He recalled seeing her entering San Souci. She was damn hot, in this leather skirt and tight sweater, and in these damn sexy boots. Hell, every man in the club looked at her and couldn't look away. He recalled her sitting on a bar stool, sipping a martini and showing off her legs. She was so damn hot, he thought. Then he remembered how men approached her one after another, but she rejected them all. But then he approached her, asked her to dance, and the rest is now history. She not only danced with him, but she moved from the bar to his table, left with him, and allowed him to be with her all night. It seemed like a dream, but it wasn't a dream because this super hot, sexy white woman was now sleeping in his van. At McDonald's, Luther bought coffee and sandwiches for breakfast and then headed back to his van. As he approached the San Souci parking lot, he saw Sharon walking to her car. "Sharon," Luther shouted. She didn't seem to hear him, so he shouted again. "Sharon, Sharon," he shouted. This time she heard him and turned in his direction. "Hey, I have some coffee for you," Luther said. "Oh my God, this is great. I really need it," she said. Sharon was standing outside her car when Luther walked over and handed her coffee. "Thank you," she said, leaning on the car. "I woke up and you weren't there, and it scared me a little. I didn't know where you went, so I got dressed, waited a few minutes, and then decided to leave. I'm glad you came back before I left," Sharon said. "I'm glad I'm back too. I'd be mad if you left," he said. "Thanks for the coffee, it's really good," she said. "You're welcome," he replied. "Do you want something to eat? I brought you a sandwich for breakfast if you want," Luther offered. "What, just a sandwich? No breakfast in bed?" she joked, laughing. "Well, we can go back to the van, you get naked, and I'll serve you breakfast in bed. Or if you want, we can go to my house. It will be more convenient there," Luther suggested. "No, no, thanks. You've exhausted me. I couldn't survive another round with you this morning if my life depended on it," Sharon said. Sharon took the sandwich from Luther. "What, did I exhaust you? Damn it, lady. It was you who exhausted me," he replied. She ate her sandwich while listening to Luther speak. They stood silently in the parking lot next to Sharon's car, drinking coffee, eating sandwiches, and just looking at each other. The magic of Friday night at San Souci quickly dissipated in the Saturday morning sun. Now they looked at each other soberly and in the light of day. Two complete strangers who had known each other very little, but now knew each other very intimately. Luther broke the silence. "So, girl, what do we do next?" he asked. Sharon thought about his question and really didn't know how to answer it. At this point, her sexual frustration has disappeared. Luther dealt with this problem, and then there was Dan. He'll be back tomorrow evening and will stay home for a couple of weeks before heading out on the road again. And of course, Marvin and Robert could show up at any moment and insist that she spend time with them. So where does Luther end up in this place? Where would another man fit into her life? And most importantly, does she really want another man in her life? She really didn't know the answer. "Don't know. Let me think about it," Sharon replied. Luther didn't expect such an answer from Sharon and looked at her in surprise. "You don't know? What do you mean you don't know?" he asked. "Don't know. I don't know what will happen next. I really enjoyed my time with you last night, but I honestly don't know what's going to happen next," she replied. "Damn it. So we're just two people who met, had sex all night, slept together, and then just went our separate ways like nothing happened," Luther exclaimed. "No, I don't mean that. I don't want to just walk away from this, but I need some time to think." She lied. Sharon had no intention of starting a relationship with Luther. He had served his purpose, and she was ready to move on. "I didn't go to that club last night thinking I was going to go out with a stranger and then have sex with him all night and wake up next to him in the morning," she said. She lied again. "Well, you were looking for something, and either you found me or I found you, but either way it worked out for both of us." "Yes, it worked," Sharon replied. "You are a special woman, and I would like to continue dating you. It doesn't have to be something serious." "Just sex," Sharon interrupted. "Yeah, just sex if that's what you want. But it could be something more," Luther replied. Luther stood studying Sharon and her body language and felt that she was hiding something. "Is there another man?" he asked. Sharon hesitated and then answered, "Yes." "Husband?" he asked. Sharon hesitated before answering. "Yes," she answered hesitantly. "I thought so. So you're some smug white guy's trophy wife." "Yes, you could say that," she replied with a slight chuckle. Luther continued to study Sharon and her behavior, and his instincts told him that she was hiding something else. "But there is another man, isn't there?" asked Luther. Sharon was surprised and considered denying her relationship with Marvin and Robert, but decided to be honest. "Yes," Sharon answered hesitantly. "Black?" Luther clarified. "Yes," she muttered. "So you have a smug white husband and a black lover." "He is not my lover." "Then who is he?" asked Luther. "This is the person I was introduced to, and you ended up having sex with him," Luther interrupted. "Yes. So you discovered that you liked a black man, and last night you went hunting for a black man and found me. Is that so?" Sharon hesitated. She was shocked and confused by how accurately Luther had described the situation to her. "No, it wasn't like that," Sharon lied. Luther glared at Sharon. "Bullshit, Sharon. Yesterday at the club, almost all the men threw themselves at you, but you rejected them one by one. But as soon as I, the only black man, approached you, you immediately agreed to leave with me, and we spent the night together. Don't tell me that's not what you were looking for, because that's what you came here for, right?" Sharon paused before answering Luther. "Yes, it is," she replied. "Listen, I understand everything. This man, whoever he was, gave you sensations that you had never experienced. You got what you were missing, and when he disappeared or became unavailable, you went to the club to look for it." "The same thing. I understand everything honestly," Luther said. "Yes, you're right," she said. "Great, glad I got it right," he said. "So, do you like black men?" he asked. "Yes," she answered quietly. "That's good," he exclaimed. "Did I do what you expected?" he asked. "Luther, you were great. You were everything I needed," she told him. "No, I wasn't what you wanted, but I had what you needed. I met your needs. That's what I want to hear," he said. "Satisfied?" "Luther, of course you satisfied me," she said, laughing. "What's next? You'll want what you need again soon, and if your boyfriend isn't there, I want to be the one to give it to you," Luther said. Sharon listened to him. "Damn, even if your husband and your boyfriend are around, I still want to be one of those who will be with you. Damn, you are perfect. One or two men will not be enough for you. You need variety, and I want to be one of these men. Damn it, Sharon, I've been with you all night. I've shown what I'm capable of. Haven't I earned the right to be one of these men?" Sharon listened to Luther. "How can I contact you?" she asked. Luther found his business card and handed it to Sharon. She took the card, walked up to Luther, and hugged him. Luther responded by hugging her and kissing her. Sharon kissed him back, and they hugged. "I have to go," she said. "I know, I just wanted to feel you again," he replied. They finished their hug, and Sharon got into her car. As she settled into the seat, her skirt rode up, exposing the top of her stockings. Luther walked closer to the car and spoke to her. "Hot woman driving a hot car, you're the perfect package," he said. "Did you leave your laundry in my van?" he asked. "I didn't find them," she replied. "Then I will find them and return them to you," he said. "No, keep them. It will be a memory of last night," she said. "Trophy?" he asked. "Yeah, you can keep them as trophies. You can hang them in your van," she said, laughing. "Maybe I will," he replied with a laugh. "Okay, but I want to see you again," he said. "We'll see," she replied. Luther didn't want to let Sharon go. He invited her to join the company that was meeting at his home. A white woman among black men, drinking beer and watching football. "Sounds like a potential problem," she said. "No, it's not what you think. Just a gathering of friends," he said. "Got it," she smiled. "I'm sure you'll like my friends, and they'll like you," he said, laughing. "Oh, I'm sure, but I'm not sure I can handle you and them at once," she said with a laugh. You can handle anything," he replied. "So I'm just your friend now?" she asked, laughing. "No, that's not what I meant," he exclaimed. "After last night, we're more than just friends," she said. "We're more than friends. Stop playing with me already. We're more than friends. I'm just inviting you to spend time with us," Luther said. Sharon realized that Luther didn't want to lose what they had last night. He wanted more, but she knew it was time for them to part ways. "Okay, I'll think about it, but now I have to go," she said. Luther closed her car door. "Okay, think about it, and if you decide to join, let me know. I'll send you the address or pick you up myself," he said. "Okay," she replied. Sharon started the car and opened the top of the convertible. "Nice car," Luther exclaimed. "The weather is so good that I decided to drive with the roof open," she said. "That's cool," he replied. "Take care of yourself, and thanks for the breakfast," she said as she switched gears. As she pulled out of the parking lot, Luther looked at her and thought, "Damn, that's a woman." He wondered if he would see her again. As soon as Sharon pulled away, she turned on the radio and Marvin Gaye's Sexual Healing started playing. Sharon laughed, realizing that she had indeed received sexual healing last night. 24 hours earlier, she had been in an emotional breakdown due to sexual frustration. The absence of Robert and Dan created sex in her life-flax vacuum. But this morning, she felt like a new woman. She was sexually, mentally, and emotionally healed. She freed herself from social conventions and old-fashioned ideas that she should wait until one of her men returns and saves her from this state. Last night, she did what she thought was right. She cleaned herself up, plucked up her courage, and went to the nightclub alone. She caught the attention of a man at a club, and they spent the night together. Now she knew she could do it again if she wanted. But as she got closer to home, her feeling of liberation gave way to guilt and remorse. She began to think about what she had done last night and in the past with Marvin and Robert. "Damn it, why did I do this?" she thought. "I'm so confused," she told herself. "I'm a married woman with a great husband and a great home. What's wrong with me? Why am I doing this?" she asked herself. "This is all so wrong. I'm betraying Dan and breaking our marriage vows. Oh God, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed. "This is not me. This is not who I am. How did I end up in this situation?" she asked herself. She kept thinking about her life and blaming herself. But then she remembered that it all started with Dan posting her photos on the internet, and that's when all these events began. She blamed Dan for posting the photos, which attracted the attention of men, including Marvin. This led to encounters that changed her life. She realized that life had taken a different path, and her life with Dan would not have changed if she had not met Marvin. She recalled feeling so cool and modern while meeting a black man for lunch at his hotel. But that decision turned out to be a turning point that led to consequences she couldn't have foreseen. She recalled her first meeting with Marvin when he persisted despite her protests and forced her to do something she had never done before. "Damn it, why did I do this? Why did I tell him that I belonged to him now?" she thought. "I don't really know why. I think he was just so persistent, and I've never experienced anything like this before." She then remembered the meeting with Robert, which was due to blackmail from Marvin. He threatened to publish the photos unless she agreed to go on a date with Robert. She felt she had no other choice and agreed, even knowing that Robert saw her as a trophy. Sharon thought about Luther. She realized that this was her personal initiative, her choice. She specifically went to the club last night to find a black man. She blamed herself for this action and decided that it had to end. "This has to stop," she told herself. "No more of that nonsense." She tried to figure out how to get out of the situation she had gotten herself into. She decided that her passion for black men and desire for the forbidden fruit was over. She planned to get rid of the influence of Marvin, Robert, and forget about Luther, who was already a thing of the past. "From now on, it will be just Dan and me," she thought. "And I know Dan will never satisfy me the way those black men did, but at least our lives will be calm, safe, and simple." As she drove, she began to feel freed from her infidelities and sins. Stopping at a traffic light, Sharon noticed Luther's business card on the passenger seat. She took the card and read his name and contact information. This card should be called Luther, the sexual healer, she thought. Damn, he was so good. And at that moment, she remembered his touch again and felt a sudden excitement. As soon as the light turned green, she continued on her way home. All Luther wants is to show me off to his friends. These black men are all the same. They want to show off their booty and share it with others, she thought. Well, that's definitely not going to happen. I'm not going to the party to become another trophy and spend the night with his friends. When she returned home, she parked the car in the garage, entered the house, and immediately went to her bedroom. There she took a shower, trying to wash away the memories of the previous night. After finishing her shower, Sharon returned to the bedroom and lay down on the bed. She thought about Dan, Marvin, Robert, and Luther, reflecting on her journey into the world of adultery and interracial affairs. On the one hand, she was disappointed with herself. Never in her life could she imagine cheating on her husband, much less with black men. But this happened, and more than once, and to her surprise, she was satisfied with these experiences. But she knew it was time to end it and get back to her life with Dan. She began to think about how she could sever all ties with Marvin and Robert and just be content with being a wife. The problem with Marvin was that he thought he owned her. To him, she was one of his escorts, and although she didn't want to be a part of it, he wasn't going to let her go that easily. She thought about how to explain to him that she wanted to end the relationship, and even considered threatening him with legal consequences if he didn't leave her alone. One way or another, I will get rid of Marvin and Robert. But Luther is already a thing of the past, she thought. From now on, it will be just Dan and me, and tomorrow night he will come home. We will make love, and it will be wonderful, she decided. Sharon decided to use everything she had learned from other men to enhance her sex life with Dan. She was determined to take their relationship to the next level, even if Dan didn't have the physical qualities that attracted her to black men. Thinking about how she would change their life together, Sharon wanted a cup of coffee. She put on a robe and went down to the kitchen. While making coffee, she noticed Luther's business card on the kitchen table next to her purse and keys. Damn, Luther won't disappear from my life, she thought, laughing. Returning to the bedroom with coffee and Luther's business card, Sharon lay back on the bed. She began to think about his offer to come to the party. Obviously, I would have to look incredibly sexy if I went there. But why am I even thinking about it? I decided to end it, she thought. What's wrong with me? She lay on the bed, angry at herself for thinking again about something she had decided to stop. She knew she needed to stop this completely. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm a healthy woman with normal desires that took me places I should never have gone. But I was there, and frankly, I liked it. But damn it, it has to end, she said to herself. I can't keep doing this to myself or Dan. With these thoughts in mind, she picked up her phone to send Luther a message with her decision to go to his party. Meanwhile, Luther was having breakfast with his friends when a message arrived from Sharon. He read it and happily told his friends that he would pick up the perfect one at 7 p.m. His friends began to celebrate the news that Sharon would be joining them at the party. They exchanged photos of Sharon, admiring her. After the game, the party really turned into something more, and Sharon became the center of attention. Sharon continued to visit the Sands Southside Club, looking for new men, and from time to time enjoyed their attention. She brought new elements into her family life with Dan, and he never suspected where she got them from, believing that it was due to his frequent travel. However, Marvin, having learned that Sharon wanted to end their relationship and that she was having fun with other men, was furious. An incident occurred that resulted in Sharon's death. The official version is that he was an accidental victim of a traffic conflict. Her death caused a great stir in the media. At the funeral, Dan met Marvin and Luther, who each introduced themselves as Sharon's friend. Dan was proud to learn that his wife was involved in volunteer work. A few weeks after the funeral, Dan began going through Sharon's belongings and found expensive clothes and lingerie that she used in her secret life. This raised Dan's suspicions, and he decided to look into her iPad and iPhone. What he found there shocked him. He found photographs, videos, emails, and text messages that revealed details of her affairs with Marvin, Robert, Luther, and other men she met at the Sands Southside Club. He was especially shocked by the realization that Marvin had blackmailed Sharon into working as a highly paid escort. The hardest blow for Dan was the discovery that Sharon had been having sex at Luther's parties. This completely drove him crazy. A few days after these discoveries, Dan went to the Sands Southside Club to talk to the bartender and find out more about what his wife was doing. The bartender showed Dan photos of Sharon, and it completely broke him. Dan got drunk, and on the way back home, he asked the driver to take him to the cemetery where Sharon was buried. There he got out of the car and, to the driver's horror, relieved himself on her grave. Even though Sharon's death was still under investigation, Dan was able to collect double the insurance payout, amounting to approximately $2 million. He then destroyed all of Sharon's belongings, including her clothes, jewelry, their cars, and their home. He turned all their property into cash, leaving nothing to remember the marriage and their life together. While handling Sharon's estate, Dan discovered a bank account containing several $1,000s. While working with the bank, he learned that the money was coming from a company, one of which was Marvin. This led Dan to conclude that Sharon had been extremely busy with her secret life while he was on the road. Of course, Dan pocketed the money, adding it to the insurance and proceeds from the sale of their property. A few weeks later, before leaving for Italy, Dan visited Sharon's grave again and repeated his act, again relieving himself on her grave. The group of people who came with him then removed the headstone, leaving Sharon in an unmarked grave. 3 months after this, Marvin was killed in a parking garage. A few weeks later, Luther and his friends were also killed in their condominium, indicating a carefully planned operation. Sometime later, investigators from Dan and Sharon's former community reached Dan in Sölden, Austria, and questioned him about his involvement in these crimes. Dan provided them with an airtight alibi, confirmed by Interpol, that he was in the Czech Republic and Kenya at the time of the murders. Although investigators were confident that Dan may have ordered the murders, they did not have sufficient evidence to charge him. The latest rumors about Dan say that he works abroad almost constantly, sometimes returning to the United States. But on the anniversary of Sharon's death, one of the couple's acquaintances allegedly saw Dan in the cemetery, where he again repeated his abusive behavior. Rumor has it that Sharon was actually working in an elite international service, and her death was linked to significant drug use, and the road rage incident was a cover-up. Dan is said to have become something of an international lover, with women in London, Paris, Brussels, Prague, Madrid, and Rome. Some tourists claim to have seen him in Paris, where he allegedly lived with a young French woman on the Champs-Élysées. And life went on. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next